Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. So actually, before today's episode, I did research on the guest, and everyone I talked to told me that she is an OG in the FinOps industry. She actually established one of the first and biggest FinOps teams at Pearson and enabled over 500 engineers there. Then she moved to the FinOps Foundation to support other enterprises like JP Morgan Chase, Apple, and Fidelity to build their own FinOps practice. But then she missed her FinOps practitioner work and moved to her current role. And today, she's the FinOps product lead at Corteva. I'm happy to welcome Ashley Hromatko. Ashley, how are you today?
So good. Thank you for having me. It's weird to say that I'm one of the OGs, but officially now been doing this about 10 years. So
So that's not my words. These are the words of people I talk to. So I guess it's accurate. And Ashley, as a FinOps OG, I'd be happy to hear from you. What should be the FinOps leader's top priority?
yeah, that's a really good question. For me, I feel like the top priority is to understand the products that for the company that I work for. So when I was at Pearson, I had a pretty big team and we divide up analysts where they each kind of got a section of the business. And that was one thing I always told them is I kind of expect the products like the back of your hand. And why that's so important is because if you know the products, you know the product owners, the seasonality of those products, you know where they're at in the development life cycle. Is this a lift and shift? Is this a run and maintain? Is this something that's going to be re-architected, right? So that is my biggest encouragement. And then when you can talk to leadership about products, it resonates with them a lot more. If you're saying, talking about your top 3 critical applications and the cost went up a lot this last month, they're probably not going to blink an eye because those are critical applications, right? If you mention a product that nobody knows about and it's gotten really expensive, that might draw some attention to figure out what that team is developing and doing. So I guess that'd probably be what I recommend to a lot of people is just know your products. That is your, responsibility.
So in a way, and if I listen to you carefully, you say that maybe FinOps is not the top priority by default. And the way to become relevant to the product leaders is to understand the product, understand their priority, and this way engage with them.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And it's always different. Like you have to figure out how your engineering team is set up. When I get my previous role, our SRE team sat under infrastructure and operations, and then the product was their own group. So they were 2 sides, right? At this organization, the product team also has the engineering team within it. So you have to also understand the dynamics of how those teams are established, because it's so important that when I come with optimization recommendations or buying commitments, that I'm going to be putting that on an engineering's backlog that is prioritized by that product owner, right? And so I got to be friendly, otherwise my things are not going to get prioritized.
Absolutely. And we actually talked a lot on this podcast about the engagement with engineers, but you're now talking about something that is a bit different about engaging with product owners. So can you elaborate a bit about the importance of engaging with product owners and how to do it right?
Yeah. So again, knowing your product owners, a lot of that comes down to tagging and making sure you have the right owners tagged. In this current role that I came into, one of the things I did early on is I kind of emailed everybody who was a product owner. And I quickly got a lot of emails bounced back. So that also told me people that had left the company and we had some hygiene issue to, identify those owners, right? But after I'd done that, I did get an introduction of like, what is FinOps, introduce myself to the product owners. And really what I did is said, here's the things I can help you with. I can help show you your cost. I can help, you look at an architect and say what could be, more affordable, right? I can send right sizing recommendations to you. I can pivot this data in any way that you want it, right? So I kind of opened myself up to them right away as a service. And so that was kind of the first initial step that I did, because eventually what you want to get to in the product family is you're setting budgets, right? And you're saying this is the budget of this product. And so that becomes a whole nother conversation with the product owner. And it depends on your organization. Again, previous organization, we were chargeback. So that accountability was really easy because it was their budget. But this current company I'm at, we do showback. So that accountability was even more important, that I made that relationship and got them to kind of care about seeing their costs and started to explain to them that you are the person that drives this cost going up and down, and that is your responsibility. There are a lot of product owners who, previously days, working on prem, that wasn't their responsibility. Their responsibility was to, tell the engineers requirements. Then the engineers asked, a data center or database team or data engineering team to, provide on-prem stuff. Now it is very much the product owner's responsibility to know their costs.
That's fascinating. And I think it's really crucial, like you said, because basically the product owners, they also prioritize the tasks to engineers. So at any given moment, even if you have the most engaged engineer that really want to do cost optimization all day, in the end of the day, the product owner, he's the one prioritizing things. So if he's not engaged, you cannot really get things done.
Yeah, and a couple of things I noticed, and we talk a lot about the job of FinOps is to, get real-time data so so people can make business decisions. But we kind of stop there. We stop training people on how to make business decisions. And I think that's a really important element of, product owners inherently have a bias that their product is going to be successful. That is, their performance is based on that. So it would typically when a product owner does initial, like, this is what I think the cost analysis is going to be, this is the return on investment. In my experience, there's not a lot of going back a year, 3 years later and seeing, did we get that return on investment for that product, right? That product is gone. It is operational. We have customers. And so if we are turning over unit cost numbers to a product owner and saying, hey, I see that your product, the cost per student is much more expensive than the other products that we have that are serving students. What is their incentivized to reduce that? Or what is their incentivized? And they can do things like, well, let me change the product. Let me do this. I had a case at Pearson where they were building this product for almost 9 months with no customers that had moved to it. It was extremely, extremely expensive. And so we had to keep showing the product owner, here's the cost of this product. Here's the cost of this product. And it was growing. And finally, we did kind of have to escalate it. And I realized in that situation that I was putting the responsibility on that product owner to know when maybe this wasn't a profitable product. Maybe we weren't going to get, it wasn't ready. And maybe we were building it out, too big before we had customers. And I realized that was a really difficult thing for that product owner to sink in and take, because again, inherently they have the biasness. They want their products to be successful. So when we say, FinOps is enabling these business product owners or, business people to make business decisions, I think we're still lacking teaching them how to make those business decisions.
And, in the end of the day, data can't lie.
Right. Yes.
This is a fascinating story because it demonstrates so nicely the impact that FinOps can have on the business. So it really can lead to decisions of, continue with the product, discontinue with the product. And otherwise, you would just, go waste tons of resources that could have been invested in better products or more innovations in other products. So that's absolutely amazing example. So actually, let's go to the beginning. How did you get into FinOps?
I started as a technical project manager. I think maybe just right time, right place. I joined Pearson, a big education company. And we were in the middle of a big lift and shift. So we were shutting down hundreds of data centers, and we were a cloud first strategy. And so I got to be on the early days of helping pods of engineering teams migrate that stuff. So I did a lot of the project estimating, tracking the milestones. I was on the calls during the migration weekends, right? So I got really, really familiar with what they were building, which was nice. And then at the same time, on my first week there, my boss was like, hey, I'm actually going to AWS. Here's this thing, the bill, go do that. So I took on the bill. We were spending less than $100,000 a month, and that grew rapidly. I mean, millions of dollars a month. And so there was a pivotal point. I was there for a few years, kind of in between these two roles, but it wasn't really a role, a FinOps role. And I read an AWS blog. I think it was the first time, FinOps was mentioned. And I took that to my boss and I said, I think this is where I want my career to go. This is what I want to do. And so it worked out really well. I was able to, my first person I brought in was from change management, which is a awesome person to hire because they know everybody in the company, right? And they also know all the products. So that was the first person I hired, and the team kind of grew from there.
Interesting. And what attracted you to FinOps? What made you say, this is what I want to do in my career?
I think that I love changing processes. I like looking at a workflow and how the work is being done in an organization and figuring out how we could be more lean with it. I have an interesting story. I used to work for ACT. It's a big testing company. And we used to take the test questions and pass them in these red folders, literally around the company. And that's how the editor and the writers and the graphic designers would slide their pictures in this folder. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. I'm paranoid all the time that we're going to lose these folders with these test questions. So we looked at finding a solution to, put it all online. And that was a big transformation process to bring people along on that journey. And so I think that's what I really like is changing processes. In FinOps, you get to do that. A good example where I'm at today right now is our front door for getting resource groups was pretty broken. It was somebody just asked for it and somebody just approved it. There was no kind of oversight, making sure that we, maybe had the funding for it. Do we have, do we have a duplicate application like this? Has it gone through an EA review? So I loved getting to look at that process and kind of say, how do we make this more efficient, but also make it easy for the end user, but put the guardrails that we need. So I think that's what FinOps like you get to do is not only just like make your spend efficient, but you get to make all your processes efficient too.
Absolutely. And I can tell you what attracts me on the personal level is the ability to do more with less.
Yes.
For me, it's an amazing experience where you can take the same resources and double the outcome. For me, it's amazing. And I can tell you on the economic level, I think that's the way to prosperity at the end of the day. We have to do that all the time.
Yep, I agree.
And Ashley, it sounds like it was so easy to get the buy-in to build a FinOps team and get people from other departments. How did you convince your company to do that?
The first round in time, it was not easy. The FinOps was not a word, right? So even saying, we're going to create a function called FinOps took a lot. It was a pitch deck, and these were the deliverables I was going to hit in the first year, and even there was a little bit within the company of this is a made up role, and what are you doing? You're just telling me to shut things down, right? And I had to figure out how to refine it, right? Make it a powerful role. Definitely made some mistakes along the way. There was one thing that we did where we tried to, every time there was a right sizing recommendation, just create an automatic ticket to go to change management. That didn't go well. So learned along the way. And so I would say the first time around, it was really hard because it wasn't unknown. And that's been one of the, I always tell my boss here, that's been one of the most amazing things coming here is I don't have to tell people what FinOps is or why we need it. Like there's just been such a leap forward that the folks are appreciative that this role is here. Someone's here to help with this. So there's definitely been a big shift.
Very interesting. And did you need to somehow prove the value of a FinOps team, for example, through proving or committing to a certain savings amount, to certain outcomes? How did you convince management to give you a budget and build a team?
That's always a hard one. And you probably ask most practitioners, we don't love being held to a savings quantity or dollar, right? Because at the end of the day, if I could go in and shut everything down, then I should own that savings, right? But that's not the power that I have. And so inherently, leadership is always going to expect a savings out of a FinOps role. And so you do have to provide the metrics and the ability to show that. We had a really good year this year where the company I'm at, we're able to keep our cloud really flat. And what was interesting is we were able to show all of these reductions that the FinOps group drove through reservations, decommissions, business case engagements. But on the other hand, we had a lot of growth. And so we were also able to say, here's all of the new growth that happened. Here's the workloads that those grew on. And so sometimes I don't know that it's about savings, but explaining the picture of how we got here. Or yes, we saved this, but guess what? We are able to buy this tool through the marketplace and not have to take it out of anybody's budget. So for me, it's more the storytelling. And then the objectives are spot on. Every quarter, every year, I set out, these are the objectives I'm going to hit. I'm going to create a championship program. I'm going to come up with one more KPI on my dashboard, right? And I like those because they're my little like goals that I drive myself towards.
Absolutely. And I want to share with you that I'm going around with some thoughts and I have a certain observation lately. I think the FinOps community, and rightfully so, we put the spotlight on business value and showing the business how we can get the most out of our cloud investment and look at things more broadly and not on cost savings. But I feel that in a way or from a certain perspective, savings are probably one of the most strategic things you can drive as a FinOps practitioners, because in the end of the day, that's what would secure or help you make sure that the FinOps function stays and budgeted, and no one thinks that we should change it in a way, because if they provide more savings than they cost, then there is no question about the necessity. I wonder if you feel the same.
Yeah, and I've talked to a couple people about this. Like, in a way, FinOps, you get the easy button, right? Because you get the dollar metric. I know you said you have a background in security, and so I think when you're in security and observability, like maybe security is an outlier because you just have to do security. But if you're in a group like observability or reliability or performance, like those metrics mean something. They're super valuable. But when you're at the leadership level, dollar speaks a lot, right? And so I think that's where selfishly FinOps gets the easier way because we have tangible dollars we're moving.
And the harder way, because if you don't
So you
provide
don't,
enough
yes.
dollars,
Right.
then it's a problem. So for better and worse, and that's what I love about FinOps. I come from security. In security, there is a big, aspect of like, let's say insurance, that something bad won't happen in the future. And FinOps, it's tangible value and you have to prove it day in, day out. So for better and worse.
And it's a balancing act too, right? Because sometimes you're trying to build capabilities, right? You're trying to work on capabilities, and so you take your eye off the ball for a minute. Maybe you take your eye off of anomalies for 3 days, or you take your eye off of creating 4 more business case cost optimization business cases. But it's because I'm working on this anomaly automation. It's because I'm spending time on this, improving this reporting, right? So it is always a balancing act of, yes, I'm trying to save money, but I'm also trying to build this practice that sustains and matures.
And Ashley, you mentioned earlier, very briefly, championship program. You didn't elaborate about that. Can you tell us a bit more about what is a championship program and why it's important?
Yeah, this is something I didn't have in my previous role. We had a really big FinOps team, and we were kind of we were the hub, right? And we kind of did everything for all of the different business units. I'm a one-person team here, so I have to think differently. I don't have a crew to do this. And so I kind of picked this up from being at the foundation and seeing what other organizations had done. Some did some hub and spoke work, and then others did the championship program. And what that really looks like is you that was almost the thing I did the second week I started here, when the leadership team asked me, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need champions. I need you to tell me someone in your organization that I can work with, that I can meet with." And that was really powerful because I got to know the teams, the contacts, the products, right? And so that champion is someone that I've worked with to bounce ideas back and forth. Hey, what do you think about this report? How would you like to see this data? They're also the people that I do like these quarterly optimization gamifications, right? And so they get the data for their group. So that champion for me is like sits in the team, doesn't work on FinOps, it isn't 100% dedicated to FinOps, but they've been told that now by their leadership that they are responsible for supporting FinOps, and so it's been really a powerful relationship. I kind of wish I would have done it before.
Would you say that when you have too many people on your FinOps team, there is actually a risk that you will do things more in a centralized way versus getting champions and getting engagement of the broader engineering organization?
I think it depends how you set it up. When you have a bigger team, as a manager of that team, you're spending more time making sure there's enough work for everybody to do as well, right? Like you're spending more time maybe going out and getting requirements from teams. What do you need? Okay, I'll take that back to my team and backlog it. So there's a little bit of that. I think you're right. When you have that bigger hub team, there's a little protection. Like we're the masters of the data. You come to us for things like that. But I've seen some really good companies do the hub and spoke. Fidelity is a really great example where, yes, they had the hub, but within one of their orgs that was very container heavy, they called it their like container FinOps SME, right? And so they knew everything about that. And over the other organization where maybe they were doing a lot more with machine learning, they had a FinOps machine learning expert. So they had those people to kind of pull in. And so I think it's more powerful when you have to have some combination of that championship out.
And I guess you have to optimize your FinOps team as well, not only your cloud cost.
You do have to optimize your FinOps team. And I've had to do that. I've brought in engineers that, did a piece of work, and then, we weren't going to need any more engineering work for a few more months. So we shared them out to another team. Right. And so that's, if you, hopefully, you can have an organization to transition and share resources out.
And Ashley, you started in Pearson, today you're in Corteva. In the middle, you were in the FinOps Foundation, which is also an interesting fact. I wonder why you did the move from Pearson to the foundation. So is that because that you felt no one knows what is FinOps and how to do it and how to justify it, and you want to fix it on the industry level?
Yeah, kind of pretty spot on. So, I think at Pearson, I feel like my boss had said that to me. Do you feel like you built something that you could leave to somebody else? And I said, yeah, I think it's ready for someone else to kind of iterate on it next, right? And I think what I saw, the foundation at that time only had like 2,000 members, is there was just a lack of information about FinOps. There wasn't playbooks, and there wasn't nearly as many vendors or service providers at that time that were putting out content. And so for me, it felt really important that we ramp up, you know, what's available, and we kind of, educate, people on this. And so I was part of the foundation in the early days when it was kind of formed, and we were just, 20 people on a Zoom call. And so it was kind of pivotal, I think, for me to join that, because I just in my gut knew it was going to take off, and it did. Within the 2 years I was there, they went from 2,000 to 3,000 members, or individual practitioners, and a whole bunch of members. And so I think it was, kind of neat being part of that big takeoff, and kind of seeing everybody else get excited and kind of geek out about something that I'm excited about too.
Yeah. And what did you like about the work at the foundation?
Every day was different, for sure. Like, I think when I first started, was really passionate about getting a job board out there. I wanted people to know how to, find positions. Shortly after that, playing the first FinOps X. So I got to do a lot of helping people develop their talks, and really enhance their content and what they were going to present. So that was really fun. And then I was really passionate about, like, how do we know if we're mature? How do we know if we're runners? And so I helped build the first, like, FinOps assessment, and that's been really exciting, because now in this role that I'm at, I'll have some vendors pitch that assessment back to me. So that was exciting to get that launched out there. I think it was really nice just being around good people. I mean, globally, you're always around people that love FinOps, love talking about FinOps. It can be intimidating though too. I think there's some amazing people doing amazing stuff, and if you try to compare yourself against them, or try to get to that level, or think, oh, I'm never going to be at that level, like, you also got to take it day by day and not get too overwhelmed by seeing so many people in the community be so far along too.
And I guess you missed the practitioner role.
Yeah, I kind of give this analogy. Like, I feel like when I was at Pearson, I was like the JV player, right? Like, I didn't really know the rules. I didn't know what I was doing. I was figuring it out, right? And then when you go to the foundation, you get to be like the coach, or maybe like the assistant coach, where you're getting to see how all the players play the different positions. And then now going back to the practitioner, I kind of feel like, coming back with more confidence. You're that varsity player, the playbooks, who to reach out to. My biggest thing coming back to this role was a totally different cloud provider. So having to start over learning, Azure, when I had only dealt with AWS, but that was an exciting challenge. I inherently, I like hanging out with engineers. I like, talking tech with folks. And so it just kind of feels like the right fit right now.
Yeah, and it really reminds me of my personal story, I have to tell you. So in my first startup, I had no idea what am I doing. Like, I didn't even know I have to raise money. By the way, it was that naive. And then we were acquired by Rapid7, and worked at Rapid7, saw how a big corporate is working, how it provides services, build products in large scale. And then I got a lot more confident to build 0.5. So it really reminds me of my personal journey. That's really, really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And Ashley, when we talked before this episode, you also mentioned that you have some a nice experience with building RFPs for tools in the FinOps space. I wonder if you can share with the audience how you do it right, how you build an RFP. Do you take templates for other people? You build something totally by your own? What's your approach?
Yeah, I do like to use a template. I'm an Excel person, so I love having a template. I'll typically try to figure out what the scope is. First time I did an RFP, it was only for AWS. Next time I did it, we included cloud, or we included GCP. This organization really has a lot of on-prem, so we might need some on-prem data. So you got to figure out your scope and then measure your capabilities. So where am I at today? Again, coming here, we didn't have a lot of anomaly alerting when I started. So I knew that was a capability that I would have measured as, low on, and then think about what has the most business impact capability. So this organization doesn't do chargeback. So while I think we are, maybe crawling on chargeback, it's also not something that's going to be impactful because that's not what the organization's direction is to do chargeback. So balance that, understanding the support you need, right? You know this too. The tool doesn't just run itself, right? You're going to need somebody to do the initial configuration, keeping up with the data, and so figure out what that looks like, and I think know what type of user you are. I've had tools that the GUI is really good, and that fits me because I'm not an engineer. But I've had teams that have been able to use a tool where they're we're doing nightly jobs to import into that tool, right? And so maybe it's okay that it's API driven, and that's what you're going to use. So figure that out. Data permissions are really, really important on tools, like who can see what, and does that tool allow you to kind of control those permissions? Don't be afraid to take a demo. I think you not only can you give that organization, feedback about their tool, but you can learn a lot. You can learn about what, whatever they're focusing on from a product development team, probably also tells you what you need to be thinking about from a FinOps person. And don't be afraid to change tools. I think, there's that stigma of like, I already did this. I've already showed all my engineers are using this tool, but the rapid pace and that companies are developing right now. There's some, the tooling, it's fantastic, like what's out there right now. And so don't be afraid to try something else too.
And do you have an approach to buy versus build? What's your default? What do you think about getting engineers into building stuff for you?
Yeah, again, I think it depends where you're at. At Pearson, we were starting to build a lot more ourselves. I think it was just our scale. We were far more mature. We were maybe outpacing some of our tools. This role is very different. Where that tool is a very fundamental key to get show back right now. It would have taken me 12 months to get to where I need to be with this versus bringing in a tool. So it's really where your company is. Also when you're building a tool, you got to keep up with it. I mean, from your experience, it's constant change. It's constant adding new features. And so you have to think if you're willing to invest in it. I think I talked to someone recently that said they spend about $180,000 to maintain their FinOps tool that they've built, right?
Wow.
So maybe that's worth it, but maybe it's not, right? And so you gotta kind of figure that out. And that was just to have the tool running. That did include the resources to run it. So
yeah, and the friction in the organization to manage the operations of supporting a tool on an ongoing basis. That's also a big part of it.
And I think it's whatever your organization. Some tools are very, again, Pearson, we were a build company. This is a little bit more of a buy company.
Absolutely. And you mentioned also like the transition between being an expert in AWS and then moving to a different cloud like Azure. How do you do transition? How do you ramp up your knowledge when it comes to a completely new cloud and technological environment?
Yeah, that was probably, I was the most excited about, but scared about, right? So taking an interview with a job where they said, well, we use Azure. And I'm in my head trying to think of like, what's an EC2, EC2 mean? Like, kind of trying to convert like terminology in my head, right? And so a lot of the approach that I kind of took is I said, okay, what are they spending the most on? Okay, it's these 4 buckets. Those are the 4 things I am going to get up to speed very, very quickly on. And so doing a lot of reading and research. And again, the documentation has come a long way where, now there's actually documentation on how to optimize, S3 or blob storage. It didn't exist, believe it or not, 7 years ago, right? So, and Copilot, I mean, you can ask Copilot anything and learn anything these days. So that's been really, really powerful, having that tool.
I can definitely imagine. So Ashley, I'm convinced that you're an OG in the FinOps industry. And thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and insights. I would like to learn about you personally. So you live today in Iowa, in Iowa City?
Yeah, I live in Iowa, so sometimes gets confused with Idaho. We're the corn state, not the potato state. Born and raised here. Corteva is also based out of here in Indianapolis. I have two girls, so we are getting really, really busy with all of our spring sports. I like to coach soccer and softball. And then I'm a big bike rider. And so another fun fact about Iowa is we do this really cool bike ride from one side of the state to the other side of the state that takes about 7 days. And so I'll probably be doing that again this summer.
And you're originally from Iowa?
Originally from, yep. When you come here, you'll understand. When you come visit, you'll see how beautiful it is and how chill it is.
Yeah. So you do some outdoor stuff?
Yeah, do a lot of outdoor stuff. We're big campers, take the RV and camp and fish and things like that. And then winter we all hibernate here. So I kind of say this last week we're all starting to come out and see all the neighbors again and hang out because we're leaving hibernation.
Very nice. That's definitely on my bucket list. I have to visit Iowa one day. Haven't had a chance yet, but hopefully soon. And in university, you studied management information systems, right? And minor in economics.
Yep. I originally thought I was going to be a history teacher, and I took my first computer class, and I really kind of fell in love with it. And I like economics, and so it's kind of interesting that economics, does tie into FinOps a lot too. So
yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you that economics is also a big area of interest for me on the personal level. I also come from a family of finance people. Both of my parents are from finance, but macroeconomics always been something that I've been passionate about and I'm reading about all the time. So I can definitely relate to that. And would you say like that was the beginning of you going into FinOps, like the mix between technology and economics? You think it started back then?
I think it just started a passion of understanding how things work. I think was where the passion originated. And I think one thing I've always been good at doing is listening to engineers explain really complicated things and convert it in a language that I could share with somebody else that maybe is less technical. And so I think I've always kind of liked that aspect too.
Very interesting. And Ashley, if I take you now to your first day in the university, what advice do you give Ashley of back then?
I would probably say everything's going to change and embrace it. I even where we're going to go the next 10 years, everything is going to change. And I think there's sometimes that resistance to change. And I think if you can just go with it, I'll also say be curious. I get kind of coined as a person that asks a lot of questions. And if I ask a lot of questions, I learn a lot of things. So keep doing that.
That's absolutely true. Great, Ashley. And if anyone want to connect with you, what's the easiest way? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Ashley Hromatko. I'm always up for, having a FinOps jam. I try to schedule, every Friday meeting with someone from the community and just learning what's new. So.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. So you heard her. She's open to meet. Take it, leverage it. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really, really fascinating.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity.
That's for sure. And I would like to thank our listeners and viewers for joining us once again for another great episode of FinOps in Action. Ashley, thank you again. It was wonderful and fascinating. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us. Hope to see you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.